recording now.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Conant Show. And this is the 18th of April, Wednesday, 2018. And I was just sharing with the lovely Paula Gloria Barton here, who's been teching for me and teching for me again tonight and always making such a lovely show. I always like to say thanks. But I was just chatting with her about why I'm in a mood tonight. Went home from work from the theater the other night, and we like to leave the radio on for our pets when we're out of the house, and the station of choice is usually AMC, NPR, one of the local public radio stations. I'm always afraid the dogs are going to start barking like Alan Chartock, but that's besides the point. NPR has been an incredibly vocal mouthpiece for the global warming, climate change meme. And it's really been laughable to listen to them bring on and report about the various speakers and representatives for the warmistas, the climate changeistas, who are absolutely determined to blame humanity, man-made, human-caused. They don't say man-made, they say human-caused climate change. They can't call it global warming anymore because, well, it's not really warming. It's actually getting colder. And I have been saying for probably 10 years or more, since I really started to study the debate and the environment. I've always been studying the environment, but really specifically I got into studying clouds because of the geoengineering that really got going in the 1990s out west, and then by 2004 the East Coast here just got hammered with crisscrossing, tic-tac-toe, white lines in the skies, chemtrailing in this geoengineering effort, which had the government had a gag order on any discussion of it and deniability of everything to do with the contrails in the sky. They're not contrails at all, folks. Contrails don't make phony clouds. But that's besides the point. The idea, though, is that we have been sold this idea that carbon dioxide is bad. It's a greenhouse gas. And as far as greenhouse gases go, all gases in our atmosphere that make the atmosphere are greenhouse gases, if you will. 70% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. Right? Nitrogen is the big dog on the block, and then that's followed by carbon dioxide, and which is actually less than the oxygen, and other elements such as helium, hydrogen, and particulates are included in the atmosphere, which could be sulfur-based particulates, carbon particulates, largely that's normally about it. And you will get various minerals swept up into the atmosphere from deserts, from big winds and things like that. So you could get a spread of things like magnesium and silica and things like that. What you don't find in the atmosphere, though, is things like free aluminum, ionized aluminum or free aluminum, and barium and strontium. These are things that do not appear in the atmosphere and appear in our rain unless somebody, and I mean a somebody, has to be a body, somebody put it up there. And the delivery mechanisms of choice seem to be a variety of aircraft. And I've got my own photo documentation of various conventional and non-conventional aircraft that deliver these particleized materials into the upper atmosphere, not even the upper atmosphere, into the middle atmosphere and even the lower atmosphere. I remember what really got me going on this was in 2004. It was like December. A military plane, looked like a C-130, a tanker plane, came very low over the Berkshire Hills in Sharon, Connecticut, right over my head, less than 1,000 feet up, and dumped all this huge, swath of white, fuzzy material behind the plane as it traveled over my head, and literally raining this white stuff down around me was just alarming, and it was very upsetting for not only myself but a lot of other people who were noticing it, people who like to walk outside or farmers and such. And a lot of people started talking to me about it because I'm very vocal, and I had already been talking about geoengineering and chemtrails. But that day was when I realized that, okay, it's on. They are spraying us like bugs. They are just spraying us like we are pests or something. Vermin, right? That's kind of what's going on here, everybody. And you really need to get educated as to what geoengineering implies and what it really is, which is, tin cans marked raid for humans floating over our heads, because many of these aircraft aren't even conventionally propelled. They're what I call gravity drive or electromagnetic engines. Anyway, back to NPR. Oh my God. They had a professor from UCLA speaking on the radio ad nauseum about human-caused climate change. It's our folks. I mean, it's our fault, folks. This climate change is really being pinned on us, everybody, humans, without any regard to actual, facts like solar cycles, which really drive everything on the earth. And there's so much more to this than carbon dioxide. They're blaming everything on carbon dioxide, and they, who are they? They being, the establishment, whether it's academia or government or, well, that's pretty much them. That is the they. The military is usually one of the guys who are delivering the goods, but the mouthpieces for them are government agencies, bureaucrats, and these academics who are, maybe this woman believed what she was saying. I couldn't stomach it anymore because she was rattling on and on about how warm it's getting on the earth, and that, everything is just going to burn up, and catastrophic, heat waves and all this kind of stuff, and the melting Arctics and the oceans rising, and, our atmosphere turning into something like that of Venus. Yeah, no. I don't know if anybody else in the neighborhood has noticed, but I'm burning next year's firewood already. All right, next winter's firewood. I've gone through all of my wood that I allocated for myself to heat with this winter. That was gone a month and a half ago. So for the last 6 weeks, I'm burning wood I've just cut. I'm burning new wood. I mean, it's dead wood because I don't take live trees. I rarely take a live tree unless it's ill or, somebody asks me to take it down. but it's dry wood, but it's this year's. I just dragged it home, and it's coming right home and into the fireplace, into the wood stove. And this is April 18th, and I am heating on throughout the night and throughout the day. I mean, I'm not even getting the break of like letting the fire go out, and I'm keeping it going still as though I'm in February or March. And here we are in the middle of April, and it's not localized, because that's a favorite thing that these puppets for the global warming camp like to say, is that, well, just because it's cold in Woodstock, New York, doesn't mean it's cold in the rest of the world. Well, folks, I got some news for you. There's stuff going on. There's a great YouTube channel called Adapt 2030, who they have been reporting fabulous and really unnerving weather events around the world, including the another great one is the Oppenheimer Ranch project. He's pretty funny. He's very excitable. Now, I can't run any audio or videos on these clips, so I can only show you the headlines and talk about it. I've watched many of these YouTubes over the past few days, sort of to freshen my mind up with a lot of these ideas. But as you can see on our Woodstock TV station, we can't access and play a simple YouTube video. And I would like to thank the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Adapt 2030 channels for any visuals that may come up on screen, if I can even get any. It doesn't even look like we can get any visuals, but we can at least get some of the headlines. Some of the things that are going on out there in the world is really alarming. Snow in southern Spain this past week, in Morocco, in Saudi Arabia, hailstorms. Camels are getting pummeled by hail the size of baseballs and things like this. Now Adapt 2030 is a very comprehensive website and YouTube channel, and both Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Adapt 2030. These two channels are really critically analyzing the fact of our impending, perhaps, mini ice age, and that our growing areas are going to be really adversely affected. And I've been saying this an awful lot to a lot of people over the years, and that is that, isn't this great that we can't get a simple YouTube up on our screen here? It's terrible. So what the premise of a lot of these presentations is that we have the reference of sunspot cycles, solar cycles. There's things called Milankovitch cycles, and there are other cycles. There's the solar cycles that happen on a 12 to 24 year periodicity, and those oscillations in our sun activity also have even wider swings or larger scale oscillations, and those are like on the order of every 400 years to 500 years. And the last real cool down that we've had was from it was in the middle 1600s to the middle 1800s. Was a very cool period, and it was very, very cold in the middle of that, the 1700s, and we're talking really limited growing seasons in the northern hemisphere, very limited. And there was a lot of, in the 1600s, there was a lot of starvation and a lot of freezing going on. And some of the things that I've been becoming aware of is like what's happening in Canada right now. Canada, pretty much from coast to coast, is still covered in snow, and they're looking at feet of snow right now. We get very, very cold temperatures in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. There's snow cover all over Michigan, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, the Sierras, the Rocky Mountains have a snowpack that is breaking records. There's no shortage of snow in the Northern Hemisphere. When we talk about Slovenia or Russia or even Turkey and Saudi Arabia, these are all places that have been getting snow, and southern Spain and Morocco in the past week. Just like we had a dusting in the past week, but that rain, that heavy rain, folks, that we just had in the past couple days, well, we were on the warm side of the cold front. On the backside of it was, in some places, feet of snow. I know Wisconsin picked up 15 inches. I heard that there was one place got 30 inches of snow. It might have been coastal Michigan. I can't remember exactly, but this is going on right now, middle of April, and they're not calling them spring storms. They're calling spring storms do happen. Spring blizzards do happen. But we've had one after another of these massive storms dropping every kind of precipitation that exists, from rain to hail and snow and fog and freezing rain and ice pellets. Unbelievable. So, meanwhile, there's this, term that's been going on and on around with people who study conspiracy theorists, right? It's like academics have a whole, agenda to discredit anybody who entertains ideas that are, counter to the mainstream talking points, right? And the idea that geoengineering or chemtrails are a real thing has now been admitted to. Yes, it's real. Government's admitting it now. They're going to go in earnest. Really, they've been testing it out. They call it testing. No, they've been pounding the skies all over the world. They haven't been testing anything. They've been operational with their chemtrailing for decades. And, I saw a great interview with a World War II pilot, one of the last of those guys still living, talking about, they were doing weather modification in World War II so that they could occlude the sky so that the German anti-aircraft gunners couldn't see the planes. So they were making artificial clouds all through World War II. And he said that they were also quite able to ramp up or ramp down cyclonic storms, such as hurricanes and tornadoes and things of that nature. So cognitive dissonance. That's what they call it. That's the thought control, mind control, power tool of choice, cognitive dissonance. So in other words, you get saturated with so much conflicting information, you can't really suss out what's real and what's not. But it's even getting better because now they're literally plugging us in with artificial intelligence and this 5G microwave technology, wireless technology, so that eventually you'll be wearing contact lenses that is your computer, the equivalent of your computer screen now. And you'll have direct, input to your ear, so that you will be able to hear and see artificial input, computerized input from this artificial intelligence-driven machinery, if you will, and everybody will be, tracked, and you won't need any, like cash money will be not only replaced by, debit cards and credit cards. It's going to go way beyond that. It's just going to be an implant on your wrist or just your DNA signature. They'll figure that out pretty soon. See, your blood, your body, that you have a frequency. You have your own resonant frequency. So once they figure out, okay, this is George's frequency, and that frequency will be then like part of a birth certificate, part of this ID card or this ID mode or medium, and you have to have enough, digital cash in your digital bank account so that you can go into a market and get your rations, and you will simply walk through like an Easy Pass sensor. Okay, it's just like the Easy Pass. They're training us with these various things. Like the Easy Pass on the highways for the tolls. So, your bag of groceries is going to be like a toll. And it just come directly out of your bank account. And, they'll eventually, it'll go from like the Very chip. That's a brand. It's very exciting. You can get your very own Very chip, right? And not have to even go through the difficulty of taking your wallet out to show present a debit card or a bank card. That's where it's going. So we will be tracked, we will be monitored, every transaction will be recorded and taxed, and whatever else they do with that information, profile you. And I was riding around today thinking to myself, really, do I want this? Do we need this? Do we need all of this saturation of microwaves and invasive technologies? Even though they're invisible, they're still invasive. They're still trespassing your biological system. All right? So, Paula, jump in.
Oh, that's why next week I hope we do that show I was thinking to do this week about the email violation of privacy by Ty Burnett.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it not just for your particular case with Laura or the annoyance that she caused me and Joe, but to open it up and show people that you don't have to accept this. We called it right to the attention of a judge. We wrote a letter up. We showed the emails. We gave comments to the different emails. And, we had a witness, proof of service. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that all the things you're talking about, yes, are very scary, but ultimately it will be claimed that we consented to it. So we have to show no consent.
Yes. Consent by ambivalence. Consent by acquiescence, consent by silence, consent by ignorance. All right? Now, this is really interesting how the law game can work because, you're bringing up a really powerful thought there, and that is that, well, consent is consent, right? That what is it? If we were to take that word apart, it's con is means pretty much with, and how is the sent part spelled? S-E-N-T. And that has mean that's something that has been sent. It means that something that is sending, that you have your you have the present tense is send, the past tense is sent. So you have sent, you're with something. You're with whatever it is that you're sending it back as, you're with it. You're with what's been sent at you, perhaps. All right? So, but anyway.
Agreement, maybe? I don't know how Black's Law... I'll look it up for next week.
I'm more in the land of cognitive dissonance about this. But yes. And for example, when the young lad that you guys had introduced me to, who had dealt with a pot bust, DJ, and he did all the right things. He said, he didn't consent. He didn't consent to a plea. Is that correct?
He was actually lucky because he wasn't arraigned right away. You're supposed to bring someone to a judge or a magistrate, but the judge or magistrate didn't want to be bothered that particular day. Either that or, the judges are getting hip to the fact that the people are getting hip, and this is...
Yeah.
This can open the whole system up for collateral attack, which is why I said last week there may be a silver lining to the Ty-Burnett cloud, and that has to do with opening things up to foreclosure, which I think if foreclosure and the heroin trade is not dealt with, you can't really adequately, say that you're dealing with war and genocide overseas. If you've got treachery and trickery and fraud going on at home, how can you possibly expect that a message of peace and prosperity is going to go overseas if the people themselves are being preyed upon because they're being tricked in court? On one hand, you're told you have a constitution, and on the other hand, unbeknownst to you, you've been rendered into a legal fiction through something as simple as presenting state ID.
Yeah.
You see, so Ty was obviously playing on the dark side of things, because you were saying earlier in the show, who does this? Are these the academics or whatever? My answer to who is the powers that be, it's those unknowns. When the court cases go on without proper signed complaints, and you can't face your accuser, how can you possibly win or even properly navigate yourself in any kind of scenario when you don't know who you're fighting? How can you do that?
You can't.
Yeah.
And I was sort of ruminating about, again, kind of back to that idea of consent.
Yes.
And how this is such a subtle, innocuous sounding thing can ruin your day and your life if you don't understand how language is manipulated by these authority figures and structures. The idea I was kind of examining here is that pleading, for example, guilty, not guilty. If you plead, you've consented. But wait a minute, consented to what? Well, you've consented to jurisdiction. And, well, what does that mean? I mean, most of us don't even know what any of this means. And it's really important to understand that that's intentional. It's to keep you in a state of confusion or insecurity so that you don't actually protect yourself. And you find you end up getting drawn into an apparatus where you didn't really give your consent, but through ignorance, you don't know any better.
In Fair Truth in Lending, it's called full disclosure.
Yeah, full disclosure. That's something that really doesn't happen in the courtroom now, does it?
And once the world gets wind of it, and that's why I believe we're kept off the World Wide Web. Public access stations haven't been able to properly access the World Wide Web, even though many of the people and many of the producers were pioneers in giving it value before it was swindled away. So if the world finds out that we have, crimes against humanity right here, then what is that going to do to their financial instruments? That's why there's a lot of pressure on swindlers to keep the voice of the people quiet.
Well, yes. And one of the things that I've been very impressed with, and this has to do with among the most ancient continuous civilizations or cultures that we have on the planet, which is the Chinese. Chinese have dynasties. They have history at least 10,000 years. 8 to 10,000 years, at least. That part of the world, very ancient. And you can track. Now, the Chinese are very astute people, and they are, scientific people as well. And they are very good observers of nature, and they are also very good at keeping records. And one of the things that they have done is they have a continuous sunspot record going back 7,000 years. Solar activity. They've been tracking it. Part of their culture. And with that database, if you will, there are cycles that can be observed. Solar cycles. And then those larger cycles are also evident because they've been tracking sun behavior for 7,000 years. So they have a really good view of the sun and the environment and what happens on the earth in these records relative can be compared against their record of what's been going on with the sun. Well, one of the most fascinating facts about all of these things is that every grand solar minimum, every one of them, that's about every 400 years, every 500 years, every one of these grand solar minimums brought a Chinese dynasty down because they couldn't feed their people and the people rebelled and the power structure falls apart. Every time. And that's one reason some of these conspiracy theory people, present the idea that, our governments all around the world, they know that we're going into a grand solar minimum, and they're building like whole underground cities all over the place. They're going to go underground. Okay, well, it's probably what happened in the past as well. But even more interesting than that is the Chinese again. Chinese have bought up huge tracts of land in tropical places such as Africa. Largely Africa, because Africa is not too far away, from the Chinese mainland. Across the Indian Ocean and you're there, right? So they are anticipating a wetter, colder climate, and that the growing areas are going to get shoved to the equatorial zones. And for those of us, here in North America, we can look forward to some glaciation happening. I don't know if it'll be miles of ice on top of New York State, but it could get, growing seasons could be truncated to just 60 days, something like that. Spring, summer, and fall in 2 months, and then the rest of the time is winter or something like winter. It could, and at any rate, we are actually in a grand solar minimum. And it has lined up with other big solar cycles. And also happening at this time is a magnetic pole reversal. So our magnetic field of our planet is in flux. It's trying to flip. That means basically the North Pole becomes the South Pole and the South Pole becomes the North Pole. But while that is happening, the magnetism of the planet becomes unstable. So we actually have kind of two North Poles going on. As of a couple of years ago, I was reading some of this science on a website called What's Up With That, Anthony Watts' website. And there's a lot of great information about the polar magnetic anomalies that are going on right now. And what that means for us on the surface is that our magnetic field that protects the planet is very weak right now, and it's doing a lot of weird things. And then not only that, but the sun has gone very, very quiet for about a decade now. It's really, very, very little sunspot activity. And when the sun does have a what they call a coronal mass ejection, right? Sometimes the sun will energetically just throw out into space charged particles, or even actual like star stuff, right? But you can see great sun videos where the coronal mass ejection gets shot out from the sun, and then it makes an arc like that, and then comes back to the sun because it seeks its own electrical balance. Okay, but sometimes it gets shot out so severely that those coronal mass material of the sun actually gets thrown off the sun and into the solar system. And this impacts the planets, especially if they actually get hit by coronal mass ejections. Anyway, now some of these reports that are coming are UV radiation. Ultraviolet radiation is hitting the planet now with a weakened magnetosphere. Okay, our magnetic protection is severely weak right now, and very high readings of UV ultraviolet B, which is known to be carcinogenic, and ultraviolet C, which is downright dangerous. I mean, this stuff is, B is dangerous too, but the ultraviolet C is like cosmic radiation. I mean, this is bad stuff, for biological systems to be exposed to. And the readings are really high out in Phoenix, Arizona, out in other parts of the country that people are out there taking measurements and readings of the ultraviolet. The ultraviolet that we're used to, the A, is high as well. And B and C are also very, very high, and they usually don't reach the surface, but with the weakened magnetic field, it is. So the sunlight is now dangerous right now because of this natural fluctuation of our planet. The sun has gone quiet, so it's not as hot, right? The more sunspots you have, the more heat is emanated from the solar functions there, from the sun. And this is a really, really ominous combination of things to have happen all at the same time. For a magnetic pole reversal to happen and a physical pole shift as well. The physical North Pole has been moving, something like 40 miles a year towards Siberia for the last decade. It's moved a couple hundred miles already. And it's the speed of that movement seems to be increasing. So, if the pole is moving, the physical pole, the magnetic polarity of the planet is flipping, and the sun is is really now in a grand solar minimum. And it was predicted by a fellow, I wish I could remember his name. I was following this guy on What's Up With That .org, I guess, is the website, Anthony Watt's site. And he was saying, well, the effects of this grand solar minimum, this is about 5 years ago, won't really be felt until, I don't know, maybe 2016, 2017, maybe 2018, but definitely by 2019, 2020, you're going to be feeling the cold. All right, I can't minimize this. I am so angry from that broadcast on NPR the other day. It was WAMC with this, academic from UCLA blaming humans for carbon dioxide causing global warming and climate chaos and climate change, when the facts on the ground is that camels are being beaten to death by huge hail, that there is growing ice at both poles right now. The Antarctic ice is growing. The Arctic ice is growing. It is not melting away, folks. It is getting bigger, and we're looking at another major snowstorm to come through the United States and Canada, I think tonight and Thursday by the Midwest. And central Canada should be hit with another storm. The big concern is growing food, folks, and the Chinese are hip to this because they've got 8,000 years of records, and they know that when grand solar minimums happen, civilizations go kaflooey because, people got to eat. And what are we doing to prepare our 330 million United States citizens? What are we doing to think forward? In the meantime, have anybody noticed all the trees they're cutting down around the sides of the roads lately in Woodstock? I'm talking to you, Woodstock. I mean, I'm seeing it all over that these trees, mostly ash, have died, and that can be a cycle too. Parasites come in, or beetle borers or whatever, but it's not just the ash trees. It's also there's a fungus that's taking out a lot of hemlocks. I'm seeing just a lot of dead trees. Now, these are young forests. There is a cycle, and a lot of trees will crowd out weaker ones. The sick and the old, they fall over, they die, they get wind blown over, whatever. That's all kind of normal. So that doesn't make me so excited, but here's the big but. And I have to credit Steve Romine for getting some recent rain sample waters testing done. And yes, all the bad guys were in there. Free aluminum, strontium, and what was the other one? Barium. These are heavy metals, soft heavy metals in a free state that does not happen in nature, in our rainwater, way over what is safe. Yeah, okay. None of it's safe, all right, for you to have, in your drinking water and in your rainwater and in your food. But what the aluminium does is it clogs the capillary hairs of the roots of trees and plants. And so a lot of trees are starving to death because they can't absorb water. And, I used to, say to people, well, do you remember that stuff called arid extra dry? Do you remember that stuff? Yeah. All right. You know what the main ingredient to that stuff was?
Aluminum, right?
Aluminum. And a lot of Alzheimer's was attributed to the use of arid extra dry. Just so you know.
And breast cancer.
They use it, aluminum, and I say so. It's like they're using, that was the big extra dry. It really dried you out. This aluminum bisulfate, right? So they're putting sulfates up in the atmosphere too. So it's like they took the old deodorant and found a new purpose for it. Let's just put it up in the sky in massive amounts, and we can create droughts because we'll absorb all the... Well, there is a backlash to that, because what happens is then you've created like a dam in the sky, and then when the water does come down, it comes down catastrophically, and that's what we're seeing. Hawaii, one of the islands, has had a biblical flood in the past few days. Massive flooding. Absolutely massive flooding in Hawaii. The Atacama Desert in the past 5 years has had, flooding rains. Right? When I say the Atacama Desert, that's now like Peru and Bolivia and down that area part of the world, South America. Well, that's the driest place on Earth. It's drier than the Antarctic. Yeah, and you see ice down in Antarctica, but you know what? Antarctica is largely a desert. The reason is it's so cold. Why would cold make a desert? Well, the colder it is, the harder it is for water to actually travel in the atmosphere. Cold air doesn't hold water, warm air does. So that's why these very, very cold places will frequently be deserts. Well, the Atacama Desert is a high altitude desert. It's cold at night and hot in the day, kind of a thing. And they've been getting flooding rains. Then there's also the cracks in the earth. There's a major crack in Africa in the famous Rift Valley. And so it appears that Africa is splitting in a significant way, coming apart. In Peru, there's been lots of cracks in the earth being noticed there. Out west in Arizona, there's huge cracks and fissures opening up, and there are huge cracks and fissures also opening up in Saudi Arabia, places like that. So there's some big earth changes going on, and those who track solar cycles have been predicting exactly all of this kind of thing. A lot of tectonic movement, a lot of volcanism, and with the combination of a weakened magnetosphere, because we are due for a pole flip, which happens, I don't know, 125,000 years. Maybe it's one of those longer cycles. Maybe it's 400,000 years. These cycles. We measure the day in hours and minutes, and we can see, the sun rises and it warms up, and then the day progresses and the sun sets. That's a cycle, right? That's a diurnal cycle. That's a day-night cycle. And then you have seasonal cycles. Here we're blessed with the 4 seasons. Not every part of the world is, especially if you move to the tropics or further to the poles, you'll get the extremes. A cold day in Hawaii is when it's 79. That winter temperatures in Hawaii are like 75. That's a very cold day. They're wearing parkas. Yeah, I have a friend from that. My friend Ralph Huntington lived in Hawaii for a long time, and he would tell me, the temperature differences. If you're used to your like mean temperature of being 82 degrees, like every day, pretty much day and night, you have virtually 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of night. So it's a very equalized equilibrium in that environment. If it gets down to 79. That's a chill. You're cold. If it gets down to 75, you're breaking out winter coats, and that's how we acclimate. That's what humans do. I'm kind of wandering around here, but I want to kind of get back on the seriousness of what I'm talking about. All right? I'm so angry with NPR because they are at this point flat out lying. Not telling the truth for a long time now about really what's coming down the pike. And it's going to be really hard to grow food if it doesn't start warming up, folks. And carbon dioxide is a miracle gas. That's another thing I wanted to touch on tonight. It is not a bad guy. Carbon dioxide is essential to life. You breathe it out, plants take it in and make oxygen. We need the oxygen. The plants need the carbon dioxide. It doesn't get any simpler than that. You all learned it in earth science in high school if you went to school. Not rocket science here. It's real basic stuff. Without carbon dioxide, we're done. You need carbon dioxide and a fair amount of it in the atmosphere for the function of life to happen. We don't need to, it's as though the powers that be, whatever that is so determined to poison us with radiation from the 5G, with the aluminum and barium and strontium and these chemtrails for the geoengineering, with the vaccines that they're pounding our little babies with now. I mean, unbelievable what we are allowing through ignorance and acquiescence and acceptance. We are consenting to all of this evil. I don't have a better word for it. It's evil. And I'm really wanting you all to, if you're computer savvy, get on YouTube and start looking at those two particularly interesting TV channels on YouTube. That is the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. WSO is another good one, and Adapt 2030. Adapt 2030. And you're going to see headlines, and the thing is my partner Laura's parents are over there in Europe, and they reported, gosh darn it, an awfully cold winter and spring. It's been, I guess a month ago they were saying it was Arctic cold was invading, Switzerland and France and England and obviously, snow in the Sahara, snow on the pyramids again, snow in Morocco, snow in southern Spain, snow in southern coastal France. This is all just last week, in the past few days. And it seems like the daffodils like opened up overnight. I haven't seen any daffodils until today. They just opened up. The forsythia, I only saw a little bit of a show of forsythia opening up down in Saugerties, in the town. I guess past Saugerties. I think I call it Glasgow, right? I guess that's a little hamlet, right? And I saw like one little hedge of forsythias that are like trying to bud. You can even see they look so sad, they're trying to open up and they're like, I'm cold. And the crocuses are barely coming up. I mean, I've seen snowdrops. I've seen a couple of varieties of wild varieties of crocus, but the usual, crocuses in the gardens, I haven't seen much of that action. And that's late. This is late. And then all these dead trees. Aluminium, free aluminum in the rain, getting into the roots. It's killing the trees massively. all over the world, not just here. And here I am telling you about it. And you're probably wondering, what can I do? I don't know what you can do. I guess complain. I don't know. You got any ideas, Paula? What can the people do? What can we the people do about all of this stuff?
We can do what we're doing right now. Talk about it, dialogue about it, share good stories like DJ. You know, if the judge had been there, he wouldn't have known at that time to say, he probably would have said, I'm not guilty, and then had the jurisdiction. So, you know, I believe there's a combination of intention and divine protection that's gained by your good intentions. I mean, look at this. Truth-seeking has become a disorder.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was talking about.
Then it goes here, you crazy chemtards. So I would say learn how to rise above labels, slander, misrepresentation of your intentions. If you know your intentions are right and you mean no harm to anybody else, then you protect yourself shrouded with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And, you know, I think there's a reason they've been around as long as they have. Even though it's a young country, it still was drawn upon the wisdom of other ages, and hopefully we can keep perfecting. Hopefully people have probably suffered a lot in the past too. I don't think this is new.
Nothing new here. No. And you know, that's why it's so important to really keep an eye on what the Chinese are doing. They know what they're doing. And 2 billion people, they got like the lion's share of people on the planet to feed. And that's why they know when you go into a solar minimum or a grand solar minimum, we're really looking at some drastic changes coming down the pike, folks. And food security is going to be a very big issue. It is, you know, you can't. If we can't secure our food and clean water, clean air, and viable fuel supply, you know, it gets real ugly very quick for a civilization. You're talking about people eating each other, and inside of 2 weeks you'll have cannibalism. That's how fast things can go wrong. All right. So I'd like to thank Paula for helping me with the show again tonight and her input. And this is Woodstock TV signing off. This is a Conant show, and you know, more to come, folks. We got to start talking about this in a real intelligent, honest way. And you know, be well and see you next week.